Buddha, everyone. So before we start the program, we're gonna go for refuge and take the precepts. So everyone chant with me. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Dhammaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Saṅghāṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Dutiyampi Buddhaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Dutiyampi Dhammaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Dutiyampi Sanghang Saranang Gacchami, Tatiyampi Buddhang Saranang Gacchami, Tatiyampi Dhammang Saranang Gacchami, Tatiyampi Sanghang Saranang Gacchami. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. To observe the 5 precepts, repeat after me. I observe the precept of
I observe the precept of
abstaining from killing beings.
abstaining from killing beings.
I observe the precept of
I observe the precept of
abstaining from stealing.
abstaining from stealing.
I observe the precept of
I observe the precept of
abstaining from sexual misconduct.
abstaining from sexual misconduct.
I observe the precept of
I observe the precept of
abstaining from telling lies.
abstaining from telling lies.
I observe the precept of
I observe the precept of
abstaining from taking
abstaining from taking
intoxicating drinks and drugs
intoxicating drinks and drugs
with the refuge of the noble triple gem.
with the refuge of the noble triple gem.
I observe these precepts
I observe these precepts
for happiness in this life,
for happiness in this life,
for rebirth in heaven,
for rebirth in heaven,
to escape from the sufferings of samsara.
to escape from the sufferings of samsara.
May it help me and be a blessing.
May it help me and be a blessing.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. So, everyone, we've been for the past, I think maybe 2 months now, we've been discussing Satipaṭṭhāna, which is the 4 foundations of mindfulness. We've covered Kāyanupassana, Vedananupassana, and Chittanupassana. So the first 3 we've covered. And now we've been discussing, for the last 2 weeks, we've been discussing Dhammānupassanā. So just so we're aware, now when we talk about Satipaṭṭhāna, what we're practicing, if we are practicing Satipaṭṭhāna, what we're practicing is the most basic, the most elementary, the most like primary aspect of Satipaṭṭhāna. So when we're talking about Dhammānupassana, to be honest, none of us are practicing Dhammānupassana. Like what we're talking about here is we're practicing something like we're kindergarten level. Okay. What we're talking about is something someone's doing a PhD. So what we're practicing versus what we're talking about is a huge, vast difference. Think about a kid in literally kindergarten where he's learning letters and the alphabet and numbers versus someone doing a PhD. So what we're discussing is someone doing a PhD when we're at a kindergarten level. So it's not just you, even me. So really what we're doing here is we're following a shadow. We're not really practicing it. We're doing something close to it. It's not truly practicing Satipaṭṭhāna, and you'll understand what I mean here, because in Dhammānupassanā, all the aspects of Dhammānupassanā is for someone who's developed mindfulness to an extent that we can't even imagine. His sati, his siya, or his mindfulness is so advanced that we can't really understand, unless we are there ourselves, we can't really understand what that even means. For example, imagine there's a cup in front of you, okay? And this cup has coffee. Now, let's say you've never ever drank coffee in your life. And I tell you, this coffee is bitter. Now you know the sentence makes sense, the words make sense. But let's say you don't know what the word bitter means. No matter how much I explain to you what the word bitter means, will you ever understand that word? You'll be like, okay, the coffee is bitter. Okay, it has this kind of bitter taste, but you won't know what bitter is because you haven't experienced bitter. We don't know what that means. In the same way, when we're talking about Dhammānupassanā, unless someone practically comes there, he won't actually understand what's happening here. He won't have an idea of, okay, this is what his mindfulness is. So today we're going to be talking about the sense basis aspect of Dhammānupassanā. And I will try to explain this as simply as possible. And I will explain a meditation or a manasikara, or a thinking or recollection of the Dhamma that we can practice to kind of get an idea of the reality of the world. But there's a big difference between the Satipaṭṭhāna portion, okay? And you'll understand what I mean. Now I'm going to share screens. Can you guys all see my screen? So it says, the beginning, it says, how does a monk practice, meditate, observing an aspect of principles with respect to the 6 internal sense bases and the external sense bases? This is just a big sentence meaning, how does someone practice Dhammānupassanā, or this meditation, talking about internal and external senses? And we'll understand this soon. So if this doesn't make any sense to you, that's okay. And then the Buddha teaches, it's when a monk understands the I. He understands forms, and he understands something called a fetter that arises because of the I and forms. So this fetter, or whatever this is, arises because there's the I and the forms. So they also understand how that fetter that hasn't arisen yet, that hasn't come yet, arises. That person that understands how that fetter that's arisen gets abandoned. And he understands how that abandoned fetter doesn't ever arise again in the future. So think about this. He understands the I, he understands forms, and he sees something, whatever this fetter is. His mindfulness is this developed to an extent, he sees this fetter, whatever this is. And we'll understand this. So first we have to understand what are the 6 internal sense bases. So this is something we've covered. So when we say internal sense bases, we're talking about 6 things. We're talking about the eye, the ear, the nose, the tongue, the body, and the mind. So those are the internal sense bases. Then when we say external sense bases, we're talking about forms. So things we see with our eyes, those are all count as forms. Then things we hear with our ears, those count as sounds. And then smells, anything we smell with our nose counts as this. And then things we taste with our tongue. So all kinds of things, whatever we taste, all counts as tastes. And then any kind of tangible we experience with our body counts as tangible. So this could be heat, this could be bodily pain, this could be the comfort of a chair or a bed, any kind of tangible. And finally, mental objects, or really thoughts, whatever thoughts or things we experience, those are all external sense, those all count as external sense bases. So then the Buddha teaches that because of these, there are 6 types of contact. And we discussed contact last time, which is when the internal sense base and the external sense base comes together and eye consciousness arises. So that means eye consciousness arises in the eye. Consciousness arises in the eye. Then with the combination of these 3, we call this eye contact. Okay? So when the eye, a form, and eye consciousness comes together, we call this eye contact. And through eye contact is how feeling, perception, intention, and craving arises. If you experience a pleasant feeling in your life, that arose due to some kind of contact, no other reason. And then if the ear, a sound, and ear and consciousness arises in the ear, with the coming together of these 3, we call this ear contact. Through ear contact, again, a feeling, a perception, an intention, and a craving arises. Through the nose, a smell, and nose consciousness, when these 3 things come together, we call this nose contact. This also leads to a feeling, a perception, intention, and craving. Then the tongue, taste, and tongue consciousness coming together, we call this tongue contact. The body, tangibles, and body consciousness coming together, we call this body contact. And finally, the mind, mental objects, and mind consciousness coming together, we call this mind contact. So through all of these contacts, a feeling, a perception, an intention, and craving arises. So for example, imagine this. Imagine you're sleeping at night, okay? You're sleeping, and now someone comes and sprays perfume all over the room, but you're fast asleep. Now, do you know that that person sprayed perfume all around the room? Are you aware of it? No, why is that? The nose is there and the smell is there. So the perfume is there and your nose is there, but you have no idea that someone sprayed perfume. What's the reason for that? The reason is consciousness didn't arise in the nose. So your consciousness is somewhere else. Your consciousness is occupied. But as soon as someone wakes you up and you smell, you get awareness. As soon as you're aware of that smell, then what happens? Consciousness arises in the nose. Then you ask, hey, what's that smell? So as soon as consciousness arises in the nose, what happens? The nose is there, the smell is there, and nose consciousness is there. Then nose contact occurs. As soon as nose contact occurs, a feeling arises. Hey, that's a good smell. Maybe it's a pleasant feeling. So it's a good smell and a pleasant feeling arises. Then you think, hey, that's a perfume. That's my perfume. But how you perceived it, you understood it. And based on that, why would you spray perfume while I'm asleep? You said that phrase with intention. There's an intention there. You didn't just blurt it out. Based on a feeling, based on a perception, then with intention, you said, why would you spray perfume while I'm asleep? But based on that feeling also, if it's a good smell, without really us thinking about it, a craving arises. So another way to understand this, imagine you're sitting at a restaurant and you're you're just sitting there and something that smells very, very good, a dish of food, passes you by. So what happens? You smell that through your nose. But how? The nose has to be there, the smell has to be there, and consciousness has to arise in the nose. Then a feeling arises. Hey, it was a good smell. And then what have you perceived it? Hey, that smells like pizza. Then with intention, hey, can I order that pizza? Can I have that same pizza, let's say? And what happened? Craving arose. So in all these ways, throughout our life, every time these contacts occurs, a feeling arises, a perception arises, an intention arises, and craving arises. So no matter what feeling you've ever experienced in your life, that all arose, all those feelings arose through one of these contacts. Everything we've perceived in our life arose through one of these contacts. Every intention, everything we've done intentionally in our life arose through these contacts. And all the things we're attached to, all the cravings we have arose through these contacts. That's what we first have to understand. then what's the problem with this? So who cares that this is occurring? Who cares that this is happening? The Supreme Buddha teaches that when this is happening, what's happening when there's craving, we're going to talk about this in the future in a short while, but when there's craving, what's happening? We cling to that. So when contact occurs, it leads to feeling. Because of a pleasant feeling, we start craving. Because of craving, we cling. Because of that, we create karma, or we create karma that leads to a future birth. Because of birth, then we suffer. It's because we're born that we experience all kinds of displeasure, including aging, sickness, death, losing loved ones and loved things, having to deal with things we don't like and people we don't like. So all that is occurring through this contact. As soon as contact occurs, there's craving, and because of craving, there's clinging. Because of clinging, there's a future, there's a formation of karma to bear fruit. I mean, there's future karma, and because of that, there's going to be a future birth. Because of birth, every time there's contact, then there's suffering. We've created future suffering for ourselves. So we can see in our own life, we can understand in our own life how attached we are to things that we see, how attached we are to things that we hear. For example, imagine you have a child. Really, that child is only these 6 contacts. That child is a form we see. That child is a sound we hear. That child is a smell we smell. That child is a taste we taste. That child is a tangible we experience. And that child is a thought. Beyond these 6 things, you don't have a child, okay? If these 6 things were there, you wouldn't know that you have a child. So then that child is just these contacts occurring again and again. And to that child, we have an attachment. We say, this is my child. This is my son. This is my daughter. If that daughter or son were to get hurt, were to come home late, anything happens to that child, then suffering arises. Why? Because of that attachment. So then one day there was an arhat named 𝗪𝗪. And this arhat 𝗪𝗪 asks arhat Sariputra, arhat Sariputra, is it that the I is attached to forms, or are forms attached to the I? So is it that this I, the I that we have, is attached to that child, or is the child attached to the I? Why is there this attachment? So is the I attached to forms, or is the form attached to I's? Then he asks, is the ear attached to sounds, or are sounds attached to the ear? Is the nose attached to smells, or is smell attached to the nose? Is the tongue attached to tastes, or is taste attached to the tongue? Is the body attached to tangibles, or are tangibles attached to the body? Is the mind attached to mental objects, or are mental objects attached to the mind? So this is what he asks. Really, let's take it simply. Is the I attached to forms, or are forms attached to the I? Now, can you guys understand this answer? Can you guys give an answer to this? Who thinks they can give an answer to this? Jeremy, can you give an answer to this? Which one is it? Is the I attached to forms, or are forms attached to the I? What do you think?
I would think the I is attached to forms.
Okay, Ishan, what do you think?
Same. It
The
can be
I is
either
attached to
way.
forms. Ruini?
Sorry, I think it's too fast. We can't define. It happens too fast.
Okay. Then look at what Arhat Sariputra says, okay? Arhat Sariputra asks another question in turn. He gives a simile. He says, imagine there's a white ox and there's a black ox, okay? And these 2 oxes are attached by a rope. So there's a white ox and there's a black ox. Now, what happens when this white ox goes somewhere? What happens to the black ox? it also goes. When the black ox goes somewhere, what happens to the white ox? It also goes. So imagine someone says, it's because of the white ox that the black ox goes. Is that right? Just nod if you think that's correct. No. Then someone says, no, it's because of the black ox that the white ox goes. Is that right? That's also wrong. What's the reason that these oxen, when one moves, the other is going? What's the reason for that? It's because this rope is there. Now, if this rope wasn't there, when the white ox moves, would the black ox also go in the same direction, the same way? No. If this rope wasn't there, when the black ox goes somewhere, would the white ox also go in the same direction? No. So then we understand by this simile that since the rope is there, then whenever the white ox goes somewhere, the black ox follows. Whenever the black ox goes somewhere, this white ox follows. If someone was to cut this rope, then whenever this white ox goes, it can roam around freely. Wherever this black ox goes, it can also roam around freely. And Arahant Sariputra says, in the same way, it's not that this I is attached to forms, it's that there is craving involved. Since when we see forms, craving arises, then attachment arises. It's not that the ear is attached to sounds, it's that there's craving arising when we hear sounds. It's not that the nose is attached to smells, it's that there's craving involved. It's not that the tongue is attached to taste, it's that there's craving involved. It's not that the body is attached to tangibles, it's that there's craving involved. It's not that the mind is attached to mental object, it's that there is craving involved. As soon as we think something, craving arises. So then if someone was to not have craving, then there would be no linking between the I and forms. Now, if like you guys said, the I was attached to forms, then there you can't ever get disattached. Why? The I is attached. There's no nibbana, there's no end of suffering. Why? Because you can't break that line. No, it's because craving is there. Craving is the rope that binds the I to forms. Craving is the rope that binds the ear to sounds. Craving is the rope that binds all of those 6 internal sense bases to the 6 external sense bases. Does that make sense? So then if someone was to get rid of craving, then this attachment, this linkage between the I and forms would disappear. There would be no linking anymore. So then when we come back to this, we recall that every time we have the I meeting forms and I consciousness arising, a feeling arises. And a perception arises, and an intention arises, and a craving arises. And we said when this happens, what happens? Because of craving, there's clinging. Because of clinging, there's a formation of karma to bear fruit. Because of a formation of karma to bear fruit, there's birth. Because of that, there's suffering. So let's say you see your child, or let's say you see a movie, let's say you see some food, whatever it is you see something you like. Immediately what happens, without us even saying, okay, let a feeling arise, no, a contact arises, eye contact arises, eye contact occurs, and a feeling arises. Then you perceive what you feel. You perceive that child now. You perceive that movie. You perceive that show. You perceive that food. Based on that, an intention occurs. Based on that intention, you might say something. Hey, you might tell your child, hey, come here. You might say, this is my favorite movie. You might say, I want to eat this. You might pick up that food and eat it. Whatever it is you do, all of those things occur with intention. And in that same way, craving also arises. Because of that craving, you cling to it. Because we cling, there's a formation of karma to bear fruit. That means in the future, you will have to experience that karma. Because of that, so here we're talking about he will be born somewhere here. That means his karma will bear fruit somewhere, either in any of the worlds. in the 4 bad destinations, in the human world, in the Deva worlds, in the Brahma worlds, or in the Arupa worlds, or the formless worlds. Wherever it is, this karma will bear fruit. Because of that, he will be born. As soon as he's born, what happens? What's inherited for him? Aging is inherited. Sickness is inherited. Death is inherited. Losing loved ones and loved things is inherited. Having to deal with things and people we don't like is inherited. Now imagine it's a hot day. What's the reason you have to experience that heat? Because you were born. What's the reason we have to deal with coworkers we don't like? It's because you were born. What's the reason we have to deal with hunger, with thirst? Because we were born. Don't just take our life. All the people, all the reason for poverty, the reason for war, the reason for famine, the reason for sickness and disease, all of that we experience because we were born. Why were we born? Because we had karma to be born there. Someone has karma to be born as an animal, as a dog. Someone has karma to be born as a human. Someone has karma to be born in hell. What's the reason that person had that karma? Is because he clung to things. Why did he cling? It's because he craved for things. Why did he crave? It's because he experienced feelings. Whenever we experience pleasant feelings, what do? We crave for it. Isn't that the reason you go on a trip? Why you crave a new sight? You crave a new experience. Why? If that sight, let's say you guys go to a lake or a waterfall, if that image, if that form didn't give you a pleasant feeling, would you guys ever go there? Would you guys ever go to the cinema and watch a movie? No, it's because that sight gives us a pleasant feeling that we crave for it. So it's because of feeling that craving arises. And why did we have that feeling? It's because contact occurred. So then how is it we break free from this cycle? That's the question that we need to ask ourselves. And that's the question that the Supreme Buddha answers. And that is, and we'll explain how this also occurs. So when we see a form, what happens? The Buddha teaches, after we see a form, we lose mindfulness. So this is normal day-to-day life. We see something with our eyes, and what happens? We lose mindfulness. After we lose mindfulness, what happens? We start recalling pleasant mental objects. So things or thoughts that we like. As soon as that happens, we get attached to what we experience. Then our mind attaches to that experience. To what we're experiencing, we attach ourselves to it. And based on that, all types of feelings, based on that, let's say that form, let's say we're looking at something, based on that form, all kinds of feelings arises. Maybe pleasant feelings, maybe unpleasant feelings, maybe neutral feelings. Based on that feeling, craving arises. And this craving causes our mind to falter. There's no more recollection of the Dhamma. Why? We're experiencing that feeling and we're craving for that feeling. In that way, what happens? We said we're creating future birth for ourselves. Then what happens? We distance ourselves from escaping from suffering. We distance ourselves from Nibbana. So currently, really at every moment in our life, when we see something, when we experience something, what's happening? This is happening. We see something and we lose mindfulness. We're not looking at it with mindfulness. Then what happens? We start recollecting pleasant thoughts. Then our mind attaches to that experience. With an attached mind, we experience that. And then our mind attaches to that experience. And then all types of feelings arise due to what we're seeing. And because of that, because of those feelings, craving arises. Because of that, suffering, we've created suffering for ourselves. Because of that, we're distancing ourselves from Nibbana. So every time we see something, we're distancing ourselves from Nibbana. That's what's happening in our day-to-day life. This is the normal day-to-day world. When we hear something, when we smell something, when we taste something, when we feel something, and when we think about something, this is happening. Each of these steps are happening. And maybe we don't identify each step, but for sure, we lose mindfulness. And for sure, we're distancing ourselves from Nibbana. Why? Because craving is occurring. So then we have to, again, ask ourselves, how do we break free from this cycle? Then we have to understand, in order to see that, we have to identify what each of these things are. We have to identify, we have to understand, how do I get rid of my attachment for this, for I, the I, not just our I, the I. Why? Because it's not this I is the problem, it's that the I is the problem. Why? Because wherever you're born, you get the I, not just a I, not just this I, the I. And how do we get rid of our attachment? For forms. How do we get rid of our attachment? For consciousness. How do we get rid of our attachment? For feeling, for perception, for intention? And how do we get rid of craving? This is what we have to solve, right? This is the problem. This is what's causing us to be born and suffer again and again and again. So then we have to understand, how does this I arise? How does the I arise? And the Buddha teaches, the I arises due to two things. This I is made up of two things. And we say this is I is made up of name and form. In the same way, the ear is made up of name and form. This nose is made up of name and form. This tongue is made up of name and form. This body is made up of name and form. This mind is made up of name and form. Okay, there is no six senses without name and form, because we say 𝗙𝗵𝗵𝗁𝗂𝗂𝗪 𝗪𝗏𝗂𝗁. That's what the Buddha teaches. It's due to name and form that the six sense bases arise. And we talked about this many, many times. When we say form, what we're talking about is the four elements. We say form is the four elements and anything made up of the four elements. So again, like we mentioned many, many times, we're not talking that, okay, someone is made up of earth, someone is made up of water, someone is made up of fire. What we're saying here is not like carbon and silicon and whatever it is. What we're saying here is, what the Buddha is teaching is, we're made up of things. For example, if we take our own bodies, there are things in our bodies that will one day go and join the earth element. So when we pass away, this body will deteriorate, parts of this body will deteriorate and become dirt, will become soil. So we're made up of this earth element. There are things in our body, for example, blood and snot and pus, all these things will join the water element. There's a heat in this body. What happens when someone dies? What do they go and check? Hey, this body is getting cold. The heat leaves this body. So there's a fire element, there's a warmth to this body. That heat will also one day leave this body. And there's also gas inside this body. When we breathe in and out, our lungs fill up with air. That air will also one day leave this body and join the wind element. And if there is anything, any form in this world, all those things are made up of these four elements, or a combination of them. But these four elements are also impermanent. They change, they deteriorate. These aren't permanent. So then this form portion of the I is impermanent. If there is an I, it is made up of name and form. And form, that form portion is impermanent. Does everyone understand that? Does that make sense? That form is impermanent? Because you have to understand this in order to understand that this I is impermanent. So the form portion, we understand, is impermanent. Everyone agrees? There's no doubts here? Jeremy, did you understand this? Okay. Then we come to the name portion. And we say name is made up of, is really five things. So we say name is feeling, perception, intention, contact, and awareness. So remember we gave that example that you guys are asleep and someone comes and sprays perfume in your room. So why didn't contact occur? Why didn't consciousness arise in the nose? The nose was there, the smell was there, but you were asleep. So what wasn't there? There was no awareness there. But as soon as you wake up, what happens? You become aware of the smell. So what happens with awareness, then consciousness has the chance to arise in the nose. As soon as consciousness arises in the nose, there's a nose and there's a smell. Then nose contact occurs. And what did we say when nose contact occurs? A feeling occurs, a perception occurs, and an intention occurs. So this I is also made up of these things. Imagine someone makes a fake eye. Someone makes an eye out of flesh. Does this ever occur? Would this ever occur? No. Why? Because consciousness, if we just make a dead body, if we just make a pile of flesh, consciousness will never arise. No matter how much we say, please consciousness descend, or please consciousness arises in this dead body, in this fake body. Will that ever occur? No. Then otherwise, if you could do that, you could just bring people back to life. But that will never ever happen. Why? Because first, the form portion, once someone dies, this form portion has deteriorated, has broken down so much that consciousness can't stay with that form anymore. And in the same way, there's no chance for this to occur. So the name portion is also, it also changes, also disappears, also ceases to be. Why? Because what did we say contact was? We said contact was these 6 things: the I, the form, and I consciousness coming together. This is eye contact. Now, we said the I is impermanent and form is impermanent. Now, ask yourself or try to understand, why is I consciousness impermanent? Now, we mentioned this before. You guys are seeing me. You guys are watching me right now. You can see and hear me right now. You hear what I'm saying and you're seeing what I'm saying. But consciousness can only arise in one place at a time. Either consciousness is in your ear, or either consciousness is in your eye, or either consciousness is in your nose. It can only be in one place at one time. So how is it you're seeing and hearing me? How is both of that occurring? It's because this consciousness is switching back and forth. It's switching from your eye to your ear, to your ear to your eye. Maybe it switches to your nose. Maybe it switches to your tongue. Maybe you taste something. Maybe you drink some water and now it switches there. So this consciousness is arising and ceasing in all of these senses, in these 6 internal senses. And it's happening so quickly that we can't even give a simile. We can't say, oh, okay, it's happening this quickly. It's happening that quickly. It's changing so quickly that we're not even aware of it. So then this consciousness that arose in our eye, in the next moment, in the next, however quick we can think of, in the next moment, it's changed and arisen in our ear. Then that consciousness that arose in the ear has ceased to be and has arisen in the eye. And it's switching back and forth. So it's arising, ceasing, arising and ceasing. Is the eye consciousness that you experienced, that arose in the morning, the same now? No, it's changed. It's arisen in somewhere else and come back to the eye. It's arisen somewhere else, it's changed. It's arisen and ceased to be. So not changed, but it's arisen and ceased, based on the awareness. Because we said, what did we say? It's through awareness that contact arises. So when our awareness changed, so you guys are watching me on the screen right now. Someone comes behind you and yells your name. What happens? Our awareness changed from the sound of my voice to the sound of the person calling you. Then you turn around and you see that form. What happens? Immediately the I, the form, and I consciousness occurs, and you understand, hey, that's my mom. Hey, that's my brother. Why? Because a feeling, a perception, an intention arose. Maybe you see your mom. Maybe you see your brother. Maybe you see your spouse. As soon as that happens, a feeling arises. Maybe it's an unpleasant feeling. Hey, don't disturb me. I'm watching something. So you perceive that. And then with an intention, you say, don't disturb me. I'm watching something. Or maybe it's something important. Maybe you see someone you've never seen for 10 years. Then a pleasant feeling arises. You perceive that person, you perceive that feeling, And with intention, you ask, hey, it's been a long time since I saw you. That's all occurring so quickly that I can't really explain to you how quickly this is occurring. Now, remember at the beginning, we said, what is this monk doing? When he's developing Dhammānupassanā, he's seeing, he's understanding, he has mindfulness that this of the eye, of forms, and the fetter. Remember we used this word fetter? When we said the word fetter, the fetter was what? The fetter was the rope. That's the fetter is talking about here. So what's the fetter? He's seeing craving. He's seeing craving that hasn't arisen. So he's seeing, we can replace this word, the craving that arises dependent on both of these. Dependent on the eye and forms. He's mindfully seeing, understanding the craving that arises dependent on the eye and forms. He's mindfully seeing how craving that hasn't arisen arises. He's seeing how craving that's arisen comes to be abandoned, ceases to be. And he understands that once craving has been abandoned, it doesn't arise again in the future. So this is something, we can't even imagine how mindful this person is. This monk is seeing he's not just understanding the eye and forms, he's seeing the craving that arises. This is something like we're just speaking words. We can't understand how mindful this is. But remember I said we're at a kindergarten level. We're understanding the alphabet here. And this is like talking about a PhD level. He's literally understanding with mindfulness and with wisdom the craving that arises as soon as we see a form. He's seeing the craving that arises as soon as he hears a sound, as soon as he smells a smell, as soon as he tastes a taste, as soon as he experiences a tangible, and as soon as he thinks a thought. He's seeing the craving arises. He sees the abandoning of that craving. He sees the arising of that unarisen craving, and he sees if he gets the chance to completely abandon that craving, he sees, okay, it's been completely abandoned. So this mindfulness is something so far beyond us, but we have to understand that there's steps to practice this, steps to get there. And let's say the Buddha teaches, imagine there's someone who comes to the I is impermanent. He comes to the idea, I is impermanent. And I wrote and the Buddha teaches I is impermanent here. There's a big difference between I is impermanent and my I is impermanent. Now you might ask, what's the difference? This seems grammatically incorrect. But the difference is, when we say my I is impermanent, we come to the idea that this I, the eyes we have right now, are the problem. But that's not the case. What the Buddha teaches is, I is impermanent. Whether you go to the Deva world, whether you go to the Brahma world, whether you go to the animal world, whether you go to the ghost world, whether you go to hell, whether you go wherever you go, what do you obtain? What occurs? You get an impermanent I. There is nowhere where there's a permanent I. That doesn't exist. So I is impermanent. It's not this I that's impermanent. I itself is impermanent. Why is it impermanent? Because form is impermanent. What's the I made up of? Name and form. Form is impermanent. And all of this is all impermanent. Our awareness has changed uncountable times today. The contact we've experienced has changed uncountable times today. The feelings, the perceptions, the intentions we've experienced all have changed. None of these things are permanent. Is there any permanent feeling in your life? Is there any permanent perception in your life? Is there any permanent intention in your life? But all of these things, these forms and the name portion, what do? We take this as me. We see this as a self. We say this is mine. So we have to understand that we're doing that first. When we see something, We have to understand that we're considering this a self. Don't just say, no, this I is impermanent, the form is impermanent, it's not me, it's not mine. That's not how that works. You have to first understand, no, we're thinking this as me. We're thinking this as mine. We're thinking there's a self here. We have to see that. We have to be genuine here. Why? Because we hear this, we listen to this, and to other Dhamma sermons, and we say, no, I don't think the I is me. I don't consider the I me. The I is impermanent. I don't consider forms me. Those are impermanent. No, we have to be real. We have to be genuine. We are taking whatever we see as me. We're taking whatever we hear as me. We're taking whatever we smell, taste, touch, and think about as me. We're doing that right now. It's happening right at this moment. Whether you know it or not, it's happening. We have to be realistic and genuine. This is happening. So I'm taking all these things as me. But if someone was to come to the idea that the I is impermanent, he comes to this idea with faith, with not just the faith like we hear a story or Jataka story and we start crying, not that kind of faith. He comes to a Shraddha or a confidence in the Buddhist knowledge that's far beyond anything we have. His Shraddha is like, we can say, like, to a very, very high level. His confidence is so great that he only sees this. He comes into this idea, not just we listen to it and agree with it. He completely is in this, he's completely involved, or he's completely, I don't know how to say that. I don't even know how to use the word. We say besagano. He's completely only in this idea. He doesn't think anything else. He doesn't come to the idea that the I is ever permanent. And when that person comes to that, we call him Saddhanusari. When he comes to this state, we say he's Saddhanusari. We say faith follower. So he understands this. He comes to this idea based on faith. He hasn't seen that the I is impermanent. He's no practical experience, but based on the confidence he has in the Buddha, he comes to this idea. He comes to agree with this, not just hearing and agreeing. He's completely and 100% involved and completely agrees with this. I don't know how else to explain this. And when someone comes to Saddhanusari, then the Buddha teaches that person is free from ever creating a karma that will take him to a bad destination. And he doesn't die without reaching the first level of enlightenment, which is Sotapanna. So, like, lots of times we hear people saying, I want to be free from suffering. I want to become enlightened. I want to do this. But we have to understand where we're at. Coming to this, I is impermanent, to this notion, to this idea, is something so far beyond us right now that no matter how much we ask, no matter how much we wish to become enlightened, to wish to escape from suffering, we're just saying some words. We have to come to this notion by seeing this, by understanding this, by practicing this. Only then could we ever come to this state, which is before Sotapanna, which is before the first stage of enlightenment. And when someone understands this with wisdom, we call that person Dhammanusari. So there's two steps before, or two people who, before they reach the first stage of enlightenment. Someone could either be Saddhanusari, or there could be someone who's Dhammanusari. The difference is, Saddhanusari means faith follower. That means he understands this. He understands this sentence right here. I is impermanence with an extreme confidence in the Buddha's knowledge. Dhammanusari means he's a Dhamma follower. That means with wisdom, he's grasped this concept. He's grasped the concept with wisdom that the I is impermanent. Not the I, all I. The I is impermanent. He understands this notion with wisdom. That person is Dhammanusari. Both of these people, they cannot die without becoming Sotapanna. And they will never collect a karma that will lead them to a bad destination. So both of these people are also free from the 4 bad destinations. So if someone can become Saddhanusari or Dhammanusari, then they're free from birth in hell. They're free from birth in the Asura world. They're free from birth in the ghost world, and they're free from birth in the animal world. So can anyone here see their next life and say, I'm not going to be born as an animal? Can anyone say I'm not going to be born as a ghost? No, we can't say that. Only these two categories and above, so Saddhanusari, Dhammanusari, and then Sotapanna, stream enter, second stage, which is Sakadagami, once returner, third stage, Anagami, non-returner, and final stage, which is an Arahant. Only those categories of people are ever free, or Arahant is completely free from all birth, but those are the only people that are free from being born in the lower worlds, the 4 bad destinations. So then what do we have to do? We have to take baby steps. We have to understand where we are at. We shouldn't be thinking, oh, hey, that person said he can get me to this state, can get me to Sotapanna very, very quickly. How can anyone do that? How can I, by teaching you anything else, get you to here, get you to Sotapanna? Can anyone do that in this world? No. If someone could do that, the Buddha would do that first. He would say, hey, come here, I'll make you Sotapanna really quickly. It doesn't work that way. Someone has to understand this with confidence, or someone has to understand with wisdom. Only then can he come to even the very first step, the baby step of either Saddhanusari or Dhammanusari. So then we have to be realistic and genuine and understand we're at a kindergarten level. But that's okay, because any kind of progress is progress. So then we have to have a realistic idea of the world by practicing impermanent meditation based on the 6 senses. Last week, I think last week we talked about impermanent meditation based on the 5 aggregates of clinging. This is also another way of seeing the same thing, but through the 6 sense bases. And we will practice one meditation here, which is practicing impermanence of the eye. And this is the same formula for the ear and nose and tongue and body and mind. So we'll practice this, but I'm just going to give you guys a rough idea of what we're going to be thinking, which is the eye arises due to a cause. What's the cause? We should have an understanding of what we're saying here. A cause means, what does the eye arise due to? Do we have eyes? You guys should know this answer now. What's the reason we have an eye? What's the cause? Ishan, do you know? What's the reason we have an eye? How is an eye made of? What is an eye made of, really?
By the 4 forms.
So name and form, nama rupa. So based on name and form. Now, is the form portion permanent? No, it's impermanent. Is the name portion permanent? It's also impermanent. So this eye has arisen due to a cause, which is name and form. When name and form ceases to be, the eye ceases to be. So therefore, it is impermanent. This eye, can we say something, if something is impermanent, can we say it's me? Can we say it's mine? Can we say it's a self? No. So then we give the idea, this recollection, that the eye is not me, not mine, and not a self. And then we said forms. So a form seen by the eye also arises due to a cause. What's that cause? Again, the 4 great elements, or if it's something living, it's Namarupa again. When that cause ceases to be, form ceases to be. It is also impermanent. And then eye consciousness. Again, we said eye consciousness has changed so much, so frequently right now, that consciousness has arisen in our ears, our eyes, our nose, and it's switched, it's changed. Because eye consciousness also arises due to a cause. When that cause ceases to be, eye consciousness ceases to be. It is also impermanent. And eye contact. Again, eye contact occurs through the eye, forms, and eye consciousness coming together. The eye is impermanent. The forms are impermanent. Like here we said the eye is impermanent, forms are impermanent, and eye consciousness is impermanent. So then obviously eye contact is also impermanent, because three impermanent things can never give rise to something permanent. So eye contact arises due to a cause. When that cause ceases to be, eye contact ceases to be. Then when eye contact occurs, what happens? Feeling occurs. This feeling arisen from eye contact arises due to a cause. What's the cause? Eye contact. And we said eye contact is impermanent because these three things are impermanent. So then feeling is impermanent. When that cause ceases to be, feeling ceases to be. Perception, in the same way, perception regarding forms. So when we see something, we perceive it. What we feel, we perceive. That is also impermanent because perception arises due to eye contact. Intention, in the same way, is impermanent because it arises due to eye contact. And the craving that arises due to forms is also impermanent because it arises due to eye contact. Just think, even in our own life, how much has this changed, this final one? When we were young, did we really crave for anything else except toys, playing with our friends? Those were things that were very, very important when we were young. To a child, a toy is something that's very, very important. If you were to break it, they would cry, they would get upset. But then as we grew older, what happened? That changed. We don't crave for it anymore. Someone broke a toy that we had and we don't really care. It's something different. Our craving, things we liked when we were smaller, are now different. Things we craved for yesterday are different now. This craving is completely different. It changes. So craving is also impermanent. But what's the reason we say it's impermanent? Is because it arose due to eye contact. Craving for forms arises due to eye contact. Now, is there any part of this that doesn't make sense? Everyone understand the words that we're using here? Yes? Just nod, just so if you understand or not. Did you understand? Yes? If you didn't understand, you can tell me now. So someone asked, oh, Jeremy asked, is form one of the five aggregates, the same as form? So when we say form, here it's the same as the five aggregates because form is just the four great elements or anything made up of the four great elements. That's the definition we find throughout the Buddha's teachings wherever form is mentioned. Form is the four great elements and anything made up of those four. So that part is the same. Okay? It's when we deal with the five aggregates and dependent origination where some of the words have different meanings. For example, sanskara or sankhara in the five aggregates of clinging means intention. But that same word, sankhara, in dependent origination or paticca-samuppada means formations. And it's explained in completely different ways. But here, understand, when we talk about the six sense spaces, we're talking about, when we say form, something made up of the four great elements and the four great elements themselves. Okay? But someone asked, Bhante, is name the same as mind? No, so again, what is mind made up of? We said the I is made up of form, name, and form. So then we can replace this with the mind. Mind is also made up of name and form. There is no mind without these two things. There is no ear without name and form. There is no nose without name and form. There is no tongue without name and form. There is no body without name and form. And there is no mind without name and form. So mind is not just this portion. Mind is name and form. It's made up of both of those things. Does that make sense? So you can't split them ever. Any other questions? Yes, Jeremy?
Just following up with my other question. So if form is the same thing as the external sense space for the eye, then how can you see wind? How can you see heat?
How do you see wind? How do you see wind?
You can see the result of wind, like leaves
So how do you
blowing in the
see wind
south.
then? So form is whatever, when we say scientifically, really, let's say you see the waves that rise from heat, when there's a hot, like the exhaust of a bus or a plane, you see the heat waves. That's you're seeing a form. No matter where you look, you're seeing a form, and that form will either end up when going back to the four great elements, and those four great elements themselves will one day cease to be. They're all subject to change. There's nothing there's permanent there. Does that make sense? That's the concept we
Okay.
need to grasp.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, Hasini, you have a question?
Yes, Swaminathan. So, I do understand how these four great elements can be in the eye, nose, ear, the other senses, but what about the mind?
So is there a mind without this body? Is there a mind? Can you say there's a mind without this body?
No.
Okay, so understand this. So there can be a mind without form, but there also can be a mind without name. Why is that? Because then I can give this mouse should have consciousness. This mouse should have a mind. The four great elements are there, right?
Yes.
But then does this have consciousness?
No.
So then the name portion also has to be there. So there is no mind without form, and there's no mind without name. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Otherwise, all the inanimate things would have life. We would just say that it's all living. But that's not how it works. Just because form is there doesn't mean there's a mind there. Doesn't mean consciousness will arise. Name and form has to be there. Sometimes there's people, their eye is completely healthy, but consciousness doesn't arise there. Does that make sense? Sometimes
Yeah.
we can remove our eye. Does consciousness arise there anymore?
No.
No. So you can't give, you can't give you can't say there's a mind without both of those things. You can't say there's a mind without name and form. You can't say mind is just name too. It doesn't work that way. Why? Because that name portion has contact involved, correct? And we said contact is the six types of contact. It is the eye seeing forms and eye consciousness. It is the ear hearing sounds with ear consciousness. So you can't ever give mind without name and form. Do you understand that?
Yeah.
Okay. Then Kamaya asks, Swaminathan, how do you practice impermanence meditation in your daily life beyond reciting the verse you just shared? So that question is, so really this us reciting this is, we're giving this idea to our mind. It's kind of like, imagine you tell your mind, like you sit down and you think, sugar is bad, sugar is bad, sugar is bad, sugar is bad for 5 hours, let's say. Then when you see sugar, what instantly comes to your mind? Sugar is bad. So maybe you're less likely to use that sugar, correct? So what we're doing is really not a meditation. What we're doing is a recollection. We're not at the stage to even do meditation, really. None of us are doing meditations. We're just recollecting a phrase, really. And that phrase is changing our mind, or it's making our mind see the world in certain ways. So for example, if someone practices loving kindness meditation, what is he thinking over and over again? He's thinking, may all beings be well. May all beings be well. So then when someone yells at that person, or someone makes fun of that person, or whatever it is, he has a recollection that instantly comes forth. Why? Because he's remembered, he's given his mind that idea again and again and again. So then he has a chance to remove his anger there. So in the same way, here when we practice impermanence meditation, we're giving our mind the idea We're trying to give it the concept that these things are impermanent. That the things we see, that the forms we see, that the sounds we hear, all of those things are impermanent. When we do that, we have a chance to reduce our attachment to those things. So for example, one 𝗏 I won't mention their names, said she had a favorite car once. Whenever she sees that car, she would think, wow, that's my favorite car, that's my favorite model. But then after practicing impermanent meditation, every time she sees that car, she thinks, oh, this car is just something impermanent. It changes. Then that her desire to buy that car, her desire to like be in that car or use that car, whatever it is, reduced. When she saw that car again, she didn't have that thought anymore. So that craving in that way got reduced. Does that make sense? So not just this phrase, not just practicing this phrase, you can practice this just throughout your day. When you see something, when you experience something, like every single feeling is impermanent. So when maybe someone yells at you, you should think, this feeling that arose, why did this feeling arise? It arose through contact, through ear contact. Ear contact is impermanent. Why? Because ear contact occurred through the ear, the sound, and ear consciousness coming together. And you can break them apart individually. Why is the ear impermanent? It's made up of name and form. Why is name and form impermanent? Form is made up of the four great elements, and the four great elements themselves combined is impermanent. Name is also impermanent. You can do this and also see impermanence. So the key is trying to see that everything is impermanent. That way we have a chance to get rid of our attachments to these things. We have a chance to get rid of conflicts and attachments that arise in our life. If we do that, then we have a chance to practice Satipaṭṭhāna. Because it says in the very, very beginning, for someone to practice Satipaṭṭhāna, in the very, very first verse, it says, this person should have distanced conflicts and attachments from his life. Then he practices Satipaṭṭhāna. So it's not, we're not even there yet. We're still trying to make the base. We're not even meditating really. We're just trying to come to practice meditation. So really what's very, very important for us to do is Kāyanupassana, maybe Vedananupassana and Chittanupassana. Just the reflection portion, because we can't even come to Vidarshana yet. We can't even come to insight yet. Really, we're just doing the basics. But that's okay. Doing the basics is better than doing nothing. That's a step forward. I hope that answered your question. Then someone asked, does Saddha-anusari and Dhamma-anusari have craving? Because you said they understand form and name is impermanent. It's not that they have full realization. It's that, so everyone has craving except an arahant, except someone who's completely removed ignorance. Everyone else has craving, even anagami, even sakadagami, even sotapanna, including Saddha-anusari and Dhamma-anusari. Because they haven't completely gotten rid of ignorance. They haven't completely gotten rid of craving. So it's that the Saddha-anusari and Dhamma-anusari are special because it's the steps, not the steps, or it's a step before Sotapanna, which is the first stage of enlightenment. But Saddha-anusari and Dhamma-anusari, the Buddha teaches, they will never do something by body, speech, or mind that will lead them to a bad destination. So they understand form and sounds and all those things are impermanent to that extent. That the eye, the ear, the nose, the tongue, the body, and the mind are impermanent to an extent where they would never do something by body, speech, or mind that would lead them to the four bad destinations. And they won't die without becoming Sotapanna. So they will, at the end of their life, maybe at some point in their life before they pass away, they will become for sure Sotapanna. So this is if Sotapanna is here, Saddha-anusari and Dhamma-anusari is like right next to it. Sotapanna is here and we're in the next room. We're like a billion miles away. It's completely different. We're just us thinking, hey, this car is impermanent, the stable is impermanent. That's like, we're kindergarten level. So Saddhanusari, Dhammanusari is this person has completed his bachelor's degree. He's completed university. Now he's waiting to his PhD. Does that make sense? This is completely different. So, but that's okay. We're taking baby steps. And then someone asks, so we're just conditioning our mind by reciting it, even if we may have not fully grasped everything? No, so just us thinking this won't work unless you understand the concept. That's why I asked, do you guys understand these ideas? Because if you don't understand these ideas, you can't even do this reflection really. Because you would think, hey, the eye arose due to a cause, then you would have doubts like, what's the cause? What was the reason? You have to understand that it's made up of name and form. And you have to understand why is name and form impermanent. That's the only way you even have a chance to see that the eye is impermanent. Does that make sense? So we can't just, you should, if you don't understand something, you should ask. That's okay. But you can't even do the reflection without understanding the concept. So you should have that understanding at least. And it doesn't have to be like this word for word. I have this, like this recitation is just, or this contemplation is there so that there's a order to our thinking. Otherwise, we'll be just thinking all kinds of things. This is something that's good to practice when you're in a calm environment, when you're alone, as a reflection. But throughout our day, if you're driving in the car, maybe you see something, maybe you hear something, you can then reflect that this is impermanent. And then you can do at that moment, a reflection based on whatever that is happening at that moment. But this is something you do as just consistently, like you giving this idea to your mind. Just like the same way someone says sugar is bad, sugar is bad, sugar is bad, and then they don't drink Coca-Cola or something. They're just giving an idea to their mind. And someone asks, is it possible to share today's recording to reflect again on what you shared? So yes, all of these lessons are shared on Facebook Live, and they're also uploaded to our YouTube channel's YouTube channel's playlist. So all the series, all the topics from Āyatana to up till now, all of those videos are up and you can watch them again and understand the concepts that we talked about. So those are all available, and this will also be there as well. So shall we try that reflection? Should we practice since our time is short, we'll just practice the reflection on the eye. So you can you can close your eyes and sit in a comfortable position. Now first, when we practice any kind of reflection, try to empty your minds. Try to calm your minds. Tell your mind, for these next few minutes, there's absolutely nothing I need to stress about. There's absolutely nothing I need to think about. I'm going to be sitting here for these next few minutes anyways, so I don't need to think about anything that bothers me. Let all your worries go. You don't need to think about work. You don't need to think about family. You don't need to think about problems. Let all those ideas go. Now bring your mindfulness, bring your attention to your posture. Be aware of how your head is placed. Be aware of how your shoulders are placed. Be aware of how your hands are placed. Make sure they're in a comfortable position. Be aware of how your feet are placed. Now, with your mind free of these ideas and thoughts, think in this way. The I arises due to a cause. When that cause ceases to be, the I ceases to be. Therefore, it is impermanent, impermanent, impermanent. The I is not me, is not mine, is not a self. Form seen by the I arises due to a cause. When that cause ceases to be, form ceases to be. Therefore, it is impermanent, impermanent, impermanent. Form is not me, is not mine, is not a self. I consciousness arises due to a cause. When that cause ceases to be, I consciousness ceases to be. Therefore, it is impermanent, impermanent, impermanent. I consciousness is not me, is not mine, is not a self. Eye contact arises due to a cause. When that cause ceases to be, eye contact ceases to be. Therefore, it is impermanent, impermanent, impermanent. Eye contact is not me, is not mine, is not a self. Feeling arisen from eye contact arises due to a cause. When that cause ceases to be, feeling ceases to be. Therefore, it is impermanent, impermanent, impermanent. Feeling is not me, is not mine, is not a self. Perception concerning forms arises due to a cause. When that cause ceases to be, perception ceases to be. Therefore, it is impermanent, impermanent, impermanent. Perception is not me, is not mine, is not a self. Intention concerning forms arises due to a cause. When that cause ceases to be, intention ceases to be. Therefore, it is impermanent, impermanent, impermanent. Intention is not me, is not mine, is not a self. Craving for forms arises due to a cause. When that cause ceases to be, craving ceases to be. Therefore, it is impermanent, impermanent, impermanent. Craving is not me, is not mine, is not a self. Okay, you can open your eyes now. So, because we're short on time, that's in that same way you reflect on the ear, on the nose, on the tongue, on the body, and the mind. So in our day-to-day life, that reflection can just be one portion. Maybe you experience something, a sad feeling. You can see, hey, this sad feeling that I'm experiencing only occurred through ear contact. What is ear contact? Ear contact is the ear, is a sound, and ear consciousness coming together. This ear is impermanent. This sound is impermanent. And this ear consciousness is impermanent. Therefore, this feeling is impermanent. This is going to change. We've all been yelled at before in our lives. We've gotten yelled at. We've been made fun of. And in those moments, we experienced unpleasant feelings. Do you have those feelings right now? Are you experiencing it at this moment? No, they changed. They ceased to be. In the same way, at the moment you're experiencing that unpleasant feeling, when someone has yelled at you, when someone has made fun of you, that feeling will also cease to be. It will also change. It is also impermanent. But it's not just important to reflect on the bad side of our life. We should also reflect on the good side. Maybe someone praises you, someone says kind words to you, and a happy feeling arises. We should also see that as impermanent. Otherwise, what happens? To that unpleasant sound, to us getting yelled at, we get conflicted. And to that praise and those pleasant words we hear, we get attached. Then, what did we say at the beginning? Only someone who has distanced themselves from conflict and attachment can practice Satipaṭṭhāna. So then, understand, we have to practice both sides. So when we hear pleasant words, pleasant speech, we should also reflect these words are also impermanent. When someone praised us, when someone said kind words to us, a happy feeling arose. Is that feeling there now? Do you guys experience this at that moment? At this moment? No, it's gone, it's changed, it ceased to be. Then that present feeling that arose will also cease to be. Then you reflect in this way. Maybe you reflect on your internal sense basis, your external sense basis. Whatever it is, you should do a reflection based on what you, at that moment. And then if you have a chance, when you sit down or when you have time for yourself, so this could be at the office, at work, whatever you're doing, you have time for yourself. You're not hindered by other things. Then you can reflect in a ordered way. The way your mind has an order, it can follow. You go through the eye, forms, eye consciousness, eye contact, feeling, perception, intention, and craving. Then you go through the ear, sounds, ear consciousness, ear contact, feeling, perception, intention, craving. That way there's an order, so your mind doesn't become restless. Otherwise, if you try to do a jumbled mess, then your mind will jump from one idea to another and you can't ever calm your mind. Your mind won't get calm. It won't ever get concentrated. Does that make sense? So that's why the recitation is important. Us reflecting on impermanence in our day-to-day life is important to see the actual reality of the world, to remove conflicts and to remove attachment to a certain degree, to a degree where we can actually come to practicing Satipaṭṭhāna. Does that make sense? So does anyone have any questions on that? Any other parts that they didn't understand, maybe they're confused on? You can ask now. Yes, Jeremy?
I'm having a hard time understanding what are the causes that result in the internal sense bases arising. Like what are the causes for the eye arising, for example?
So in last week's class, we mentioned that form arises due to form, which is, remember we said when we see something, contact occurs. And through contact, what happens? A feeling occurs. Then we perceive that feeling. And based on that, we have an intention. And then craving occurs. Through craving, what happens? Clinging occurs. Through clinging, what happens? We create karma that will bear fruit. That means it will bear fruit in one of the worlds. That means we'll be born. And as soon as we're born, what happens? Based on your karma, you receive an eye. It might be damaged. You might be blind. So you received the form portion, but name doesn't arise there. Name is damaged. Name can't arise. Consciousness can't arise in the eye. So someone comes and cuts your eye, or maybe something goes in your eye, what happens? Form gets damaged and consciousness can no longer rise there. So based on our karma, as soon as we get born, we get there's ears. So your eyes, the eyes you have right now, that lifespan, the lifespan of your eyes, when was it determined? The color, the shape, all of those things, when were they determined? They were determined in your previous lives, not this life. You don't have brown eyes or blue eyes because of something you did in this life. Those were all determined in the last life. The ears you have, the nose, the body, everything, your face, all this was determined in a previous life. Because all those things arose previously, based on karma you collect in your previous lives. Does that make sense? Okay. Any other questions? Since no one has any other questions, I think, then we'll end the program there. So today we collected lots of merit. All the merit we collected by learning the Supreme Buddha's teachings, by doing a reflection on impermanence. All that merit we share with all the devas. May all the devas rejoice in this merit. May all the devas provide righteous protection to all these lay devotees and their families. May all the devas have the good fortune to escape from this long journey of birth and death. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. We share all the merit we collected with our teacher, 𝗵𝗺 𝗪𝗪𝗀 with 𝗵𝗺 𝗪𝗪𝗀, with all the monks of Mahamevnawa, all the monks training in the Buddha's dispensation. May all the monks rejoice in this merit and be able to realize the Four Noble Truths in this Gautama Buddha's dispensation. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. We share all the merit we collected with all these lay devotees and their families and loved ones. May all these lay devotees and their loved ones be happy, healthy, and well. May you all have long lifespan. May you all be able to realize the Four Noble Truths and escape from this long journey of birth and death. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Everyone chant with me. Kayena vacha chittena pamadena maya katang acchayang kamame bhante bhuri panya tathagata. Kayena vacha chittena pamadena maya katang acchayang kamame dhamma sanditthika kalika. Kayena vacha chittena pamadena maya katang acchayang kamame sangha punyakhetang anuttara. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. I'll chant a blessing for you all. Abhivadana 𝗙liche niccang vardhāpachaino chattaro dhamma vaddanti āyuvanno sukham balang āyurārogya sampatti sagga sampatti mevacha ato nibbāna sampatti minate samijjatu. May you all be happy, healthy, and well. ථેරවන් සරණයි, Namo Buddhaya.
Also says, can we chant the forgiveness 10,000?
Okay.
Devotees, now let's go to the flow and worship 𝗙𝗪. 𝗏𝗪ce vandāmi bhante maya katam punyam samina anumoditabbam.
Sadhu, sadhu, anumodami.
Samina katam punyam maiham dātabbam.
Sadhu, sadhu, anumodate.
Sadhu sadhu anumodami. 𝗏𝗪ce dvarattena katam sabbam acchayam kamitame bhante.
Kamami kamitabham.
𝗏𝗪ce kamami bhante. Dutiyampi 𝗏𝗪ce kamami bhante. Tatiyampi 𝗏𝗪ce kamami bhante.
May you all be happy and well. ථෙරවන් සරණයි, Namo Buddhaya.